Hi, welcome to part 2 of the Lion Cub in pastels, and on this video, this part 2 section, I'm going to concentrate on this part of the head, this upper part of the head. It's quite complicated because we've got lots of wrinkles and undulations with the fur and the skin underneath in this section, so that's quite tricky. And I'm also going to cover the bridge of the nose. That's another tricky area because that's where we've got the most real swirls of short hairs going in lots of different directions. And I'll probably do a little bit beneath the eyes onto the cheek area as well. So quite a lot to cover on this part 2. Not a lot in terms of sizes of the area, but actual complexity of those sections. And what I've started doing here is to put in the dark areas that are kind of showing the recesses in between these undulations. So where those wrinkles in the forehead are, or in the upper part of the head, I'm getting those darks in first as per my usual process. Now I'm learning more and more all the time about pastels myself, and obviously I'll continue to learn forever. So I'm trying to pass these tips on while I learn them as well, and that's why sometimes, you know, you may see me doing things in a slightly different manner than perhaps a video that I've done 2 years ago when I was first starting in pastels. Obviously I've got 20 years worth of oil painting under my belt that I'm applying to this as well. And I'm still learning with oils. It's an ongoing process. So sometimes when you look at my older videos, you may think, oh, well, he's not doing it quite that way now. And that's probably the reason why I think the ways I'm trying it now may be slightly better. If there are slight differences, 90% of the techniques have stayed the same anyway. So I'm just putting those dark elements in first. Very similar to what I did when I did the fur in between the eyes. So we've got the mid-tone down with pan pastels, a very thin coat of that, and that's giving me the general shape on it. You can generally see where the highlights are going to be, where the darks are going to be. This section that I'm putting in now, that's adding more refinement to that. So it's really giving me a definite area of, say, the edge of a light section, as I'm doing now, so I can definitely see where that crease, that fold is going to be. And obviously if I make a mistake now, I can smudge it in with my finger, or, you know, at this stage I could just go over it with a light pastel anyway. So it's a really very much a drawing stage now, where I'm just mapping out once again where the darks are going to be, where the lights are going to be. Then once I've done that and I double check that it's all in the right place, then I can start filling in the fur texture with a lot more speed and a lot more confidence, knowing they're in the correct positions. So I'm just going to carry on now mapping in these areas. Okay, so I know now pretty exactly, more than generally, exactly where the light and the dark sections are, where those undulations are. Now, as I mentioned, I can come back, a bit more confidence, knowing where the darks are, and I can texturize it, start putting in the shadow areas as I am now, and as I did with the fur between the eyes. So same technique. But now I know where those edges are, I know which bits are going to be dark, which bits are going to be light. I can just come in with that brown pencil. Some areas I'll use more of a reddy pencil, and just put in the fur texture. Obviously I'm then going to come back. You can see I'm putting a bit of a more of a sienna kind of colour going in there now. Then I can come back and start to go lighter, 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 as I did between the eyes, building up the layers, building up the texture and the realism on there as well. So same process, It's just this is really quite a complicated area to be doing it. So when I've got a complicated area like that as well, I like to approach that when I'm fresh. So after I did the eyes and the bit of fur between the eyes, I've left that for the day, overnight, come back to it now to tackle this quite complicated area. Now, sections that are going to be light, I'm not using my dark pencil. I'm using a lighter pencil on those areas to put just the slightest bit of texture on there. If I've got an area that's going to have a lot of highlights on there, chances are we're not going to have dark recesses in between the hairs. If I put the dark recesses in there, then it's all going to look very sharp and more like the spines on a hedgehog rather than a softer fur of a lion cub. So you can see I'm coming in now with some orange strokes where the warm light is catching more of the highlight areas. So these little touches of colour, they do add some interest rather than, as I said on the first video, going in just with say 3 or 4 pencils for the whole thing, a couple of browns and a couple of ochres and perhaps a raw sienna and making do like that. Now I've established those darks, I'm coming in, I've got my black pencil because this area needs to go much darker. In the reference photo it's a very dark, warm, rich brown. Now I haven't got that in any of the pencils at all. So the most important part then is the tonal colour or the tonal range. So it's more important to match the light and the dark section, in this case the dark section, the dark amount, than it is to match the colour. Okay, so keep that in mind. If you haven't got the exact colour you need, think, does it need to be darker? And if it does, go with that. Go with your pencils that are darker. And as you'll see, when I start layering, it'll all work out okay. Now you can see it's quite surprising how dark I've gone on that underlayer on the top of the head. And lots of people ask me, how do I know how dark to go? The best thing is for me showing you how dark I'm going, and for you to, you know, watch the videos and skip through the videos, watch them a few times and perhaps look backwards then from the finished article and jump back in the videos, and you can see how the layers are building up. Perhaps even take a photograph or screen capture at various areas and you can see those layers building up. But I do go fairly dark, but you can still see a lot of that pan pastel underlayer that's really giving me the colour, the base colour. So building up the darks even more in places. That's all going to add to the depth of the fur. And now those darks are in place, I'm gradually going lighter. So that pencil, kind of a raw sienna, ochre type of look to it. Lots of these pencils have got all fancy names as well. So, and as I mentioned, I never look at the numbers on the pencil, I never look at the name. I have my pencils by the side of me so that I can look at the tip. The tip is generally closer to the colour that's going down than the colours that the companies put on, so the shaft of the colour on this Carbothello is actually very close, but on lots of other colours with various makes they're not. So the tip is a bit better to go by, still not perfect, but I've got them laid out by the side so that I can actually look at the actual tip of the pencil. So you can see I'm not going too light too quickly, just like I did with that fur and the haze between the eyes. I'm gradually building them up, definitely going in that direction, the fur direction, the growth, the way the fur is lying, and that's creating now these undulations, these ripples of fur and skin that's going to give this cub character. So I've got to take my time. This is all real time you're seeing now. Take my time building up the layers, and when we get to the end of this video, in real time, part 1 and part 2 together, that's 4.5 hours worth of pastel drawing. So you can see it's quite fast to do this amount. When you get to the end, you'll see how much I've done, but to do that amount in pastels, I think that's quite a fast medium to use, and the technique is quite fast as well. Not that you need to be rushing, but for those of you that want to be a pet portrait artist, it's no good doing something this size if it's going to take you 40 hours and you're going to charge £200 or $300 or something like that for 40 hours worth of work. You're never going to make a living out of it. So if you're going to be a pet portrait artist in particular, you need to be skillful enough to be quite fast, because obviously your time is then money if you're doing it professionally. Pastels, I've found, for getting this amount of detail, is probably the fastest of all the mediums, only second to oils. Oils you can do round about the same time, but I still find pastels slightly faster than oils, and for me personally, for this amount of detail, I find them substantially faster and easier than coloured pencils. So obviously keep that in mind if you're working professionally or hoping to work professionally. Speed does actually come into it then a little bit, or a lot. Okay, so I'm just going to carry on now with the layering, going lighter and lighter, but you can already see the difference between the left side as we're looking at the screen to the right side, the underlayer to something with a couple of layers. And here I'm starting to go even lighter again, keeping those hair strokes random but in the general direction. That sounds a bit weird to be saying that, but when I'm saying random, I mean that picket fence I talked about in video 1. We don't want them all parallel lines, so that's a randomness, but going in the general direction of the undulations and what you're seeing in the reference photo. So get your reference really close to whatever subject you're doing. Get it really close to your working area, as close as you can. Now that could be a tablet. If you're working from a tablet on an arm, get that really close so you're just glancing from that to your actual artwork in as small distance as possible. So continuing to work here, there's a lot of this sienna colour and a lot of that flesh colour being used on this section. Like I said, I'm concentrating on the direction of the strokes more than anything. Gradually building up layer by layer. Now I'm starting to go lighter again. Fairly sharp pencil. This doesn't need to go everywhere, just where the highlights and those haze are, the sun, the light are hitting just the tips of the haze. In some areas you see it a lot more, in other areas it may just be one or two haze, but that light is really just zinging across. Obviously with the undulations then we've got the deeper areas and they are more in shadow. Here you can see just little tiny marks, making sure all the marks are not the same length. And then I can continue then on the right hand side doing exactly the same technique to marry both of those sections together. So you can see there how I did exactly the same technique. I've layered that underwork of texture, then I put in, you know, more of the mid-tone highlights on there. Now I'm starting to go even lighter again. Important to keep that direction correct. Don't want to be rushing it because I can't really undo these mistakes. If I make a mistake now, I can't undo it that easily. It would mean reworking that area. I could rub it off with microfiber cloth, but I'd really not be doing that if I could possibly help it, because that wouldn't really be very easy then to match up. It's better to take your time and build up the areas slowly, gradually. I'd rather build them up slowly than do it much faster and get things wrong. Here's a bit longer here, so longer strokes. Remember, the highlights are going to come on top of this. And now what I think I'll do for the next 5 or 6 minutes, I'll just let the video run at real-time speed. This will give you the opportunity, if you want to fast forward and skip 5 minutes or so when I'll start working on the bridge of the nose. That's totally up to you. If you want to just watch exactly how I'm building up the final highlights on this section, you can just watch that as well. So I'm just going to let it run now real-time speed for 5 or 6 minutes. Then we'll start working on that bridge of the nose. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is another quite complicated area. Lots of little short haze twisting and turning, changing direction, meeting up against each other. I'm just putting the correct shape in and refining or redefining the dark lines around this short section of the mouth and around the nose, so that I can then bring the haze as they come down from between the eyes right down to the tip of the snout area, overlapping the haze as I go along. So I'm just working out exactly where they are going to meet. So by here, rather than using a black pencil, I've got this, it's more of a dark grey, a dark blue grey. I'm just putting those in place on the more dark elements, and this is going to show me where this complicated hair and fur twists and turns, comes around this bit of a beauty spot on the cub, this black mark, and then they meet in the middle by here. First one way, then the other way comes into it. So this is what I mean about this being a fairly complicated area, and one that lots and lots of beginners and novices and people that are not familiar with painting and drawing wildlife, they struggle with this because they can't see easily the direction that these hairs need to go in. They can't make sense of the reference photo. But in general, where they meet in that bridge in between the eyes, from where the in between the eyes to the bridge of the nose is starting, just above from where I am now, the hair is fanning from the eyes and starting to point downwards towards the nose. That's the general direction of the way it's going, from the eyes and fanning down. Just putting a bit around these cheek areas too. But what I'm going to do now, I'll speed this back up a bit, because I'm just going to be using dark blacks and dark brown pencils to put in, as per usual on this drawing, the dark elements of the haze and the fur as it comes down towards the nose. I'm going to get those in first. So that's the dark elements, the dark haze down the nose. Now I'm just re-establishing the spots, the whisker spots. So I don't want to lose those marks. They are quite critical to the shape of the muzzle. And if you lose those marks, it can be quite difficult to work out exactly where they are going by and the number and the positioning. So easier not to lose those marks. You can obviously see how thinly, once again, that pan pastel is applied, because you can see those pencil marks of those whisker dots quite easily through it. And I'm just, once again, I just tap the camera. I'm trying to get a camera so close to the drawing that you guys can all see the details. Sometimes, every now and again, I accidentally bump my head against it, so it's really close to the side of my head. So I'm just, once again, blocking in the little dark haze. Checking out the shape here, because it goes light down on that section, and then we've got these kind of ovally areas coming over to the first bank of dots. Let's get this next one in as well. This will all be refined obviously later on. But once I've got them in, I can then judge where the next kind of lumpy section goes, like that. And then I can get these other dots in, and that's giving me the the shape of that outer section of the muzzle. By then we've got a few dark hairs going there, so quite happy that that shape's correct. Now I can do same over on this right hand side as well. Okay, so that's coming along quite nicely. Don't forget, all looks a bit distorted on the camera because I'm going at a slight angle. Okay, so keep that in mind. I need to go a bit darker on this section of the nose. There's quite a lot of shadow on there. We've got the highlights on the one section. For them to show up correctly, I need to make sure I go dark enough, otherwise the highlights are not going to look like highlights. Highlights look like highlights because they're offset with the darks. If we don't go dark enough on the darks, the highlights won't look as bright. So I'm just going to darken this all up in some of the areas. And now going much darker here, so picking out some more dark individual recesses. And we need to go much darker in the middle section, and then we'll be ready to start adding lighter marks on top. Okay, here comes the lighter marks. As per normal, starting not too light, but really concentrating now on the swirls and the twists of the haze. I'm turning my pencil quite frequently, as you can see in my hand, keeping that edge nice and sharp. And on the reference, the haze are very short little dots. I'm going to make them slightly longer because this is a real eye-catching area. If the cub was slightly younger, the haze would be longer anyway. Perhaps even if the weather was colder out there, the haze would be a bit longer too. I'm not going to lengthen them by much, but enough so that the viewer can actually see the twists and the turns and the twirls that I'm going to spend a lot of time doing. So hopefully they'll appreciate all the work I've put into it. If the marks are very short, it'll be difficult for them to really see all those changes of direction on the highlights. So now going lighter, I've got that pink pit pencil. My reference is off to the left and really close by. So you can see now how these parts I find really interesting and enjoyable to do. When I was beginning, they used to frustrate me when I used to do this in oils because I couldn't quite work out the angles and the positions and the way things were twirling. I would make it up sometimes and think, yes, it must be doing this, and it all looked wrong. If at all possible, don't make anything up. Look at the reference. If you can't see or you can't make out what's happening, either look at other references to supplement it or draw what you're seeing, draw exactly what you're seeing. If you can duplicate what you're seeing in the reference, it'll look okay, it'll work out. Some fine lines up here as well. You can see as one area then starts to butt up against another, it all starts to make more sense. Go a lot lighter here, so you can see in this light section I haven't got those dark marks, but they're still showing up because it's still the light marks I'm putting on top are lighter than what's there already. Twirling the pencil a lot in my hand, otherwise you're going to get a flat edge and you're going to be sharpening it all the time and wasting loads of pastel pencil. Now back onto the bridge of the nose. This is a section where I said they come together, they kind of fan together, meet in the middle and start coming down the bridge of the nose towards the direction of the snout of the nose itself. So lots of little lines coming from that swirl, gradually coming downwards. Now this area is meeting up and butting up against the middle, so this is all coming upwards, then it starts to come downwards. So you see the position now, it starts changing here. Don't forget it's a bit distorted once again because of that angle of the camera, but you'll see other views later on where it'll be more straight on, and also, as I mentioned on video 1, I'll show you a few photos at the end of the last video so you can see it dead on, straight on, without the camera distortion taken by my digital SLR. So I'm going to continue now building this up once again, as per my usual, going lighter and lighter, just like I would with oils. Now I'm really coming in with my light pencil, my creamy coloured pencil, going over the same marks, going in this similar position but not quite, so slightly changing direction, and that's all marrying up there quite nicely. You can see how it comes along around here and downwards. I'm not putting this light tone everywhere. Got to be mindful how these are butting up against each other because they're mirroring each other from the left to the right and meeting in the center. So as this is once again a complicated area, or an area that I always used to find complicated and it's still a bit tricky now, I'm just going to let that video run real time again, because I know lots of you like to see things in real time. You don't need me talking over the top, sending people to sleep with my Welsh accent, and I'll just let you see how I'm building up these final layers and final details. So now I'm going lighter still. So it's probably about, with the pan pastels, the darker areas going in, the darker texture, then kind of a mid-tone, then a light, then the real highlights. Probably about 5 layers going on. Definitely 4 layers to build up this amount of depth and texture. Now I'm just starting to put in the general colours and tones of the nose itself. Nothing complicated about this at all. It's not a major part of this drawing. Mainly a mid-tone. I'll darken it down a bit, put a highlight in. That'll probably do for the moment. I'll come back in and refine it later on. And then I'll start to think if I want to work out with the muzzle and carry on with that, and the chin or the cheeks and work out that way, or the ears. It doesn't really matter. When I'm working with that marl stick, I'm not touching the canvas, so that does free me up then, whereas normally I'd be thinking, okay, I don't want to be resting my hand in the glassine paper too much on any of the finished fur. So I'd probably, after I'd done the eyes, I'd be working from top left to bottom right in general, but with this marl stick I can really dot around a lot. So I've just put the general colour, general tone in on the nose. Now I can start to refine it, but as I said, not much really to actually do of the nose itself. Even with these just minimal highlights, or subdued highlights, it's starting to take shape. And the shape, don't forget, is coming from the play of the lights and the darks. just refine the actual physical shape of it by putting the darks in. I'll do the same across this small section on the top as well. Using jaggedy lines here rather than straight horizontal lines. Obviously the haze then will overlap on top of that. I'm going a bit darker here in this bottom section too. Okay, so we're almost done on part 2. I need to go quite a bit lighter on the bridge of the nose. So I'm going to get my lighter pencils out now, start building up the final bits of texture. I haven't got much pastel down on the surface. So that means by using pastel mat, I can continue adding layer after layer after layer. Obviously, there's a finite limit to any pastel paper. Even if you're using sandpaper, eventually you're going to fill up the texture of the paper. You won't be able to get any more on top, detail wise anyway. So obviously it's prudent to then work with as minimal amount of pastel as possible going on at any one time. As you learn more and more about pastels, you learn how to not push too hard with them in the early stages, and to, as I said, deposit only small amounts of pastel at a time and gradually build the layers up. Okay, so that's starting to look pretty good. I'm happy with that. Got my light color out now. This what I would class more as a Naples yellow or a cream color rather than the white. And this detail section, I love doing this. This is, you know, that icing on the cake, so to speak, where it's all starting to come together. And the hour or so that I've been doing this section, that's all worth it then when it starts to look quite realistic. Now I've got that light pencil in my hand, thought I might as well put a bit here on this side section too, just as I'm bringing video 2 to a close. So we did cover quite a lot in video 2. That section on the head, those undulations of skin, that was quite tricky. That turned out okay. And now we've done another really tricky area, the bridge of the nose, with all those swirls as well. So hope you've enjoyed video 2. I'll continue to add a few more details as the video ends, and I'll see you all again on the next part.